Iowa State transfer Tyrese Hunter has included Louisville in his final six. We'll talk about what he could bring to the Cardinal program and more on this episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Today's bonus episode of the show is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. As always, I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to personally thank you for making us your first listen of the day. And just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Tyrese Hunter, the Big 12 Freshman of the Year, has decided to transfer from Iowa State. The Louisville Cardinals made his final six. We will talk about what he could possibly bring to the Cardinals program. We will then transition into talking about the baseball team's series victory over the ranked NC State Wolfpack. And then finally, we will dive into the weekly mailbag segment. But starting out with Tyrese Hunter. Hunter, the reigning Big 12 Freshman of the Year, is currently one of the best transfers available in the portal currently. The Cardinals have made his final six, however, very quickly after entering the portal. Hunter came out with the top six. This was back 3 days ago, back on Monday. Tennessee, Kansas, Louisville, Gonzaga, Texas, and Purdue. So this is an interesting situation because the Cardinals are going up against some big-time competition. It seems like I may have read this. I'm not sure if that has been confirmed or not, but I think that he is planning visits to Gonzaga and Texas. So if Louisville can get him on a visit, that would be huge news for the Cardinals, as we just saw how successful the Cardinals were in swaying Brandon Huntley Hatfield to commit after he was being thought of as a Auburn lean, a very heavy Auburn lean. So getting him on a visit is critical for the Cardinals' chances to land one of the best transfers in the portal currently. Averaged 11 points per game last season, 3.5 rebounds, 4.9 assists while shooting 39% from the field, 27% from behind the arc. 2 steals to go along with that as well. He ranked in the top 5 in the conference in steals per game and assists per game, respectively. So, statistically speaking, doesn't necessarily, jump off the page. 40% or, nearly 40% from the field, less than 30% from behind the arc. But ultimately, I think that the talent was put on full display this season. Tyrese Hunter was on a Iowa State team that kind of snuck into the NCAA tournament and made a little bit of a run to the Sweet 16. Had some big-time performances throughout the season. A couple of them that I remember watching. He had a 19-point outing against Xavier on Thanksgiving week. Really picked it up in conference play. Had a 20-point outing against Oklahoma. Also 18 points against Oklahoma State in the SEC. Actually, that wasn't in the SEC Big 12 Challenge. I apologize. He had 14 points in the SEC Big 12 Challenge against Missouri. Had 22 and 4 against West Virginia. Most notably, however, this was when I really became familiar with Tyrese Hunter and really became fond of him as a player, was in that first-round matchup against LSU in a 59-54 victory. Played 34 minutes, shot 61% from the field, 23 points, 3 assists to go along with 5 steals. One of the reasons why I think Tyrese Hunter would be exactly what the doctor ordered for the Cardinals is because when you go back and you watch what Kenny Payne said he was looking for on his roster, it's exactly the type of player that Tyrese Hunter is. It's a guy that passes the ball well, plays very good defense. Passing and defense were two of the main aspects that Kenny Payne was looking for in a prospective player. And Tyrese Hunter really embodies the type of player that Kenny Payne, or I feel like Kenny Payne, is looking for. One of the best players in the Big 12 this past season, very good on ball. You see the statistical numbers averaging just under 2 steals per game, which is very, very solid, especially in a conference that has so many good guards. Overall, adding him to this Louisville roster would be, I mean, like I keep coming back to this term, exactly what the doctor ordered, but it is. You have a starting spot for him. I think that he would be able to coexist with L. Ellis. I look at, Tyrese Hunter is probably like the lead guard, but I don't think it's confined to just that, because I think that L. Ellis is going to see a lot of ball handling responsibilities as well. Tyrese Hunter can play off ball, which is very solid. And if you remember, Hunter is a player that Chris Mack recruited very heavily coming out of high school. I do want to, for reference, talk about what Jerry Meyer said about Tyrese Hunter. In his high school scouting report, Hunter was ranked as a top 40 player in this past year's class, the 6th best point guard. Jerry Meyer projected him as a Power 5 starter, which he was. He was the best freshman in the Big 12 this past season. Slight of build, but extremely athletic, is a dynamic scorer, but also has a feel for involving teammates, adept at using screen both with and without the ball, shifty on the drive, and a creative and acrobatic finisher, especially with the right hand, has adequate shooting range and is a threat to shoot from behind the ball screen, needs to become a more consistent shooter and better off the catch, is engaged as a defender and rebounder. Size and strength are the main questions regarding his ceiling. Hunter is 6'1", I believe under 180 pounds. But regardless, you saw just how effective he was on both ends of the court this past season for Iowa State. He's a player that would be able to come into Louisville right away. He would start and possibly be able to crack an all-ACC team. The potential is off the charts in terms of an overall basketball player, but I like his projection as both a facilitator and as kind of a crafty, advanced level scorer. We saw that he has the potential to score at all 3 levels at Iowa State. The main thing, as Jerry Meyer pointed to, was the consistency. You have to get a little bit better than shooting 39% from the field. You have to get better than shooting 27% from behind the arc. One thing that I do think bodes well is the fact that he's shown that he can hit those shots. He can create his own shots off the dribble, which is an extremely valuable skill. Can create offense for himself and his teammates. Orchestrates really well in the pick and roll game, which I think of all the possibilities that could involve Jalen Withers, Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, even Sidney Curry to an extent, and how Tyrese Hunter would be able to orchestrate the offense. If the Cardinals do end up adding Devin Ree, you have a guy like Devin Ree who's a good shooter, Kamari Lance who can stroke it from deep, L. Ellis who's a good shooter as well, and even Jalen Withers and Brandon Huntley-Hatfield who have shown to have range. So possibilities are limitless. I think for a multitude of reasons, this makes too much sense for the Louisville Cardinals, as it probably does for all other programs that are in the top 6 for Tyrese Hunter. I think that, their work is cut out for him. Not only do you have Texas and Gonzaga possibly getting visits, Purdue, is sending Jaden Ivey to the league, who's likely going to be a top 5 pick. Kansas and Bill Self, one of the best talent developers in the country. He doesn't have to go far from where he was at in, I think it's Ames, Iowa. Is that where Iowa State is? I'm thinking it's in Ames, but he doesn't have to go far to Lawrence and play for a national championship program and a national championship coach. And then you have, obviously, Gonzaga. I think that speaks for itself. Very, very solid, and you have a chance to be very good every year. But I do think that not only do you have Nolan Smith, a pretty solid recruiter, but also a great developer of talent. A guy that has been there. A player or a guy that has won a national championship both as a player and as a coach. So, yeah, I do think that it's going to come down to Can Louisville get him on a visit? If they can get Tyrese Hunter on a visit, you have to feel at least somewhat decent about the chances to land the Big 12 Freshman of the Year. But this is a type of player that can set the tone for next year's team, can change the whole ceiling of the team. I know that, the statistics don't necessarily jump off the page, but when you factor in another year of development and what he was already able to do as a freshman for an Iowa State team that really wasn't all that great, but helped them get to the Sweet 16, look, this would be a huge monumental get for Kenny Payne early on in his head coaching position here at the University of Louisville. But we'll put basketball aside for the moment. We'll transition over into baseball, where the Louisville Cardinals baseball team bounced back from a series sweep to Florida State the weekend prior. They got a victory against Kentucky. We talked about that victory, but also continue that momentum into last weekend, where they swept. They didn't sweep. They defeated the NC State Wolfpack and won the series against the ranked team from Raleigh, North Carolina. We'll talk about what last weekend's action taught us here in just a second, after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, BetOnline. Look, betonline.net is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find all of the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. Hey, Louisville fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. As I mentioned countless times over the past week, today, for the first time ever, Locked On is hosting live coverage of the 2022 NFL Draft from our studios in Dallas, with pick-by-pick analysis from our local team experts and draft gurus. Tune in all 3 days as our draft team guides you through every pick and every trade in real time. It all starts on Thursday, April 28th at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. That is today. And that is available on Locked On NFL on YouTube and on the Odyssey app. So be sure to check that out wherever you like to get your podcasts. But transitioning over into the baseball realm, the Louisville Cardinals baseball team seemingly continuing the momentum from the Kentucky victory last week with a series win over the ranked North Carolina State Wolfpack. The Cardinals, ranked inside of the top 15, defeated the 23rd ranked opponent 11-4 on Friday evening, lost 15-10 on Saturday, and won 11-7 on Sunday. On Friday, it was a game that NC State kind of came out early, set the tone, was up 4-1 in the fifth inning. Ben Bianco with a grand slam, a monumental home run to put the Cardinals ahead 5-4. The team would not look back as they scored 9 runs in the seventh inning alone and won that game 11-4. A huge victory overall for the Cardinals. As I mentioned, Ben Bianco was 3 for 4 with 4 RBIs. So it was huge to see him come up big, hitting in the ninth hole. Pitching-wise, the Cardinals struggled a little bit overall in terms of to start out. Jared Poland, 6 innings of work, allowed 8 hits, 4 earned runs, but did strike out 11. So that was a big number, getting a lot of swings and misses. Ben Wigman got the victory, 2 hits and 1 innings pitched. Cade Grundy continuing to pitch very, very solid. 1 inning of work, 2 strikeouts. Jacob Ferris with 1 inning and 2 strikeouts as well. Moving over into the Saturday game, it was kind of another sign that if Louisville doesn't score a lot of runs, well, can the pitching really will the Cardinals to victory? Well, the Cardinals scored 10 runs on Saturday and weren't able to get the victory. NC State opened up the scoring big, 5-0 early on in the second inning. Cardinals come back a little bit, it's 5-3. NC State pushes the lead back out to 5. Louisville ends up cutting it. They actually take the lead, 10-9 in the sixth inning, and then in the eighth, things kind of fall apart again, and NC State scores 6 unanswered runs. So, Dalton rushing had 2 hits on the Saturday game. Jack Payton was 3 for 4, which was big. Isaac Humphrey 3 for 4. Ben Bianco 1 for 2. Pitching wise, Caleb Corbett, who has got a start in the past 2 weeks or weekend series, got the start on the Friday game against Florida State. Didn't necessarily do all that well. I know that there was a costly error that kind of skewed the game for him. But in this game against NC State, well, he struggled in that one as well. Only pitched 1 2/3 innings, giving up 6 hits, 5 earned runs. Only pitched 43 pitches. Evan Webster came in 2 1/3 innings of relief work, 0 hits. Will Koger only a third of an inning, 2 hits, 2 earned runs. Garrett Schmeltz gave up 2 runs in 2/3 inning. Ryan Hawks pitched really well. Tate Keener Tate Keener, Alex Galvin, Michael Persecki all had 1/3 of innings pitched and couldn't get out of innings. And Cam Robinson had an inning pitch as well. So, overall, the Cardinals on Saturday, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pitchers appeared in that game against NC State, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them lasted less than an inning. That for the Louisville bullpen, something has to change. And it also begins with the starters, because it's kind of a cohesive thing to where the Louisville bats are coming around. The Cardinal offense is very solid, but it comes down to the pitching, because if the starters aren't doing well, you can't really rely a lot upon the bullpen as well, because the lack of consistency. Caleb Corbett, for the second straight outing, I don't think he goes over 3 innings in either of those starts, especially not this past one. And it forces the Louisville bullpen to get taxed a little bit. Evan Webster comes in and pitches really, really well. And then from Koger down to Robinson, the Louisville bullpen just isn't able to get it done. So at the end of the day, after Caleb Corbett gave up the 5 runs, the Louisville bullpen ended up giving up 10 more. So despite Corbett not necessarily pitching all that well, the Cardinals did score 10 runs. But at the end of the day, the bullpen gave up 10 runs to the NC State Wolfpack. Look, that's got to change. The Cardinal pitching staff has to become a little bit more consistent. The command has to get down as well. The team did bounce back, however, in a high-scoring affair on Sunday. They won 11-7 to win the series, just like the day before. NC State hopped out to a big lead, 5-0 in the first inning. What it seems like the kryptonite for the Cardinals has been getting themselves into a deficit early on. The team was able to battle back 5-4, and then they kind of went back and forth. The Cardinals were able to break into the lead and take the lead in the 8th inning with a double from Jack Payton. Levi Usher continued in the 8th. Beard had a RBI sac fly, and then Ben Bianco's walk scored the 11th run of the contest. Christian Knapczyk 2 for 6, Jack Payton 2 for 4, Dalton Rushing 2 for 3, Levi Usher 3 for 5. The Louisville Cardinal bats at it once again. Riley Phillips did not necessarily pitch well again. He's really struggled so far in these last couple series of ACC play ever since he pitched really well against Boston College. 1 innings of work, 3 hits, but 5 runs. Tate Keener pitched 3 innings. Pretty solid. Had 1 hit, 1 walk, and 1 strikeout. It was good to see him get into a groove. Carson Leggett, 1 inning of work, 2 walks, but 2 strikeouts. Alex Galvan, 1 2/3 innings, gave up 2 hits and a run. Carter Lohman got the win, 1 1/3 innings of no-hit baseball, and then Michael Persecki shut the door on the NC State Wolfpack with a 1-hit, 1 inning pitched outing. So overall, the Cardinals, they win the series, but they score. They scored in double digits each and every game. They scored 32 runs in 3 games. They lost one of those games because they gave up 15 runs. It seems like if you're looking for a positive, the good news is the fact that when this team does get down, they don't panic. They chip away at the lead. They do a great job of, continuing to, minimize the lead and get back into games. They're very clinical when it comes to at the plate. They have good plate discipline from 1 to 9. They're very, very solid. The issue obviously is the pitching. You're going to have to get better outings from the starters. All of the starters, Jared Polin gave up a handful of runs, did really well, had 11 strikeouts. It looks like he's going to be the Friday starter going forward, but you need a little bit more effectiveness in taking away some of those runs. And then you have Caleb Corbett and Riley Phillips who are continuing to struggle. So the question now becomes, who does Dan McDonald turn to as the Saturday and Sunday starters? Because when you do get into postseason play, when you're forced to play games back to back to back, you have to pitch some of these guys that maybe you're not necessarily comfortable in pitching. You're going to have guys start to step forward and be able to produce and have some quality starts. Caleb Corbett has struggled in his starts against Florida State and NC State, obviously two good opponents. Riley Phillips, the past couple starts, hasn't necessarily been all the greatest. So it's about getting the mojo back, getting the consistency in there, and having the pitching staff as a whole be able to, increase their command. And I think that overall that's going to help this team, reach new heights because the bats are there. It's about the pitching coming around. So the final segment of the show, however, I want to dedicate it to the weekly mailbag segment. Obviously, it's a little later in the week with it being a Thursday. I apologize. Like I mentioned, the scheduling conflicts of this month have been very, very challenging to navigate. But over the next couple of days, we're going to have 2 episodes on Thursday, 2 episodes on Friday, 2 episodes on Saturday to end the month. So be sure to keep an eye out on all of the good content coming out. If you are watching this on YouTube, you're obviously not going to hear the inserted programming ads that you would hear if you were listening to this on any streaming services like Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, so on and so forth. So just disregard that. And but in terms of the third segment, when it comes to the mailbag, there's a couple of good questions that have been accumulated over the past week, and I've really wanted to answer them because I do think that there's some very, very good questions that made me think. So let's get right on into it. Starting off, we will go to the basketball side of things. This relates to the roster currently. With the 8 players that are currently on the roster, which role do you think Kenny Payne needs to fill moving forward? Example, lead guard, dominant wing, etc. I think it's probably just, honestly, another guard, another starting caliber guard, because right now all you have, and I mentioned this on the other episode that's airing today, the only guard technically that you have on the roster is L. Ellis. 5 of them are in the front court. You have Sidney Curry, Jalen Withers, J.J. Traynor, Brandon Huntley Hatfield, and Roosevelt Wheeler as big men. You have L. Ellis in the backcourt. You have Kamari Lands and Mike James, who are probably wings, but could be converted over to guards, used as shooting guards, possibly. So, and Devin Ree, if he were to commit on Sunday, he's a wing as well that could possibly play the 2 guard, possibly, but you still want high-level guards. I look for that to be addressed in the transfer portal. Like we mentioned, if Tyrese Hunter were to come to Louisville, he would definitely fit this category. So in terms of what the Cardinals need most, they need to find L. Ellis a backcourt partner. They need to find him a guy that, can coexist and play on or off ball. And just be able to complement L. Ellis's skill set. And it's just about, filling out the roster right now. There are 8 spots. So the next question is, how would you personally like to fill out the Cardinal roster? Let's say you have 8 spots. You have 8 roster spots that are filled. You have 5 open ones. If I could theoretically fill it out, I would add Tyrese Hunter, which would be 1. I would add Devin Ree, which would be 2. 3 would be Monty Bates. And at that point, you have 2 scholarships to work with for players that will probably enter the portal between now and Sunday now and Sunday when the deadline for entering the transfer portal and being eligible next season passes. So I'll leave 2 scholarships open for players that are going through the draft process, that are going to inevitably come back and will be in the transfer portal. So Imani Bates, Tyrese Hunter, and Devin Ree would be a very, very solid start to next year's roster. And you have to remember, not all 13 guys are going to play rotational minutes, but I think it's just about adding guys that fit what you're looking for in players, but also, best player available mode. Tyrese Hunter would give you a backcourt running mate for Ellis, a starting guard. Devin Ree is not necessarily a project, but a player that is probably going to develop over the first year and be a very, very solid shooter, a situational shooter. And year 2, you're looking at a very solid contributor. And now Monty Bates, excuse me, I get it, didn't necessarily have the greatest season at Memphis, but he's only 18 years old, has a ton of talent. I think has all of the tools to be a very, very successful NBA player. And I think, if Kenny Payne feels like he is a good fit for this team, then who am I to judge that, and who am I to disagree with him? I think that I would really, really, really want Monty Bates on this team. So moving forward, this is more along the lines of baseball. What do you think this team's ceiling is, and why do you think of it as that? Well, I mean, I don't like to put a ceiling on this team. I'll kind of rephrase my answer, or kind of rephrase the question. I think that anything less than a super regional appearance is a disappointment. As of right now, it's yet to be seen whether or not the Cardinals are going to be hosting a regional. But making a super regional has to be the expectation for this team because they have one of the best offenses in college baseball. It really comes down to the pitching and the effectiveness in that realm. But I do think that they have the personnel to make a deep run. The ceiling, obviously, is winning it all, going to Omaha and winning the first national championship in program history. But that is the absolute ceiling. And they have the pieces to get there, but it's about production. It's about getting to where you need to be and putting things together. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I think that anything less than a super regional appearance is a little bit of a disappointment. Anything a super regional appearance and beyond is obviously a pretty good season. So moving on into the women's basketball side of things. Okay. All right, got you. There was a list that came out. I'm sorry, I was trying to find the question and couldn't find it. And I'm like, I have women's basketball written down, but the question is actually under a different part on the paper. The question is, with the new ESPN piece out that has Morgan Jones and Chrislyn Carr rated as top 10 transfers for next season, do you think Louisville has a chance to get back to the Final Four? I do think that there's a chance. I think that obviously you're replacing a lot. You're replacing Emily Ingsler. You're replacing Kiana Smith, Chelsea Hall. 3 very, very solid players, 3 starters. So, you got 2 starters in Chrislyn Carr and Morgan Jones that are coming in. Both very, very solid ACC scoring options. Morgan Jones, all ACC first-team player. Chrislyn Carr, a very solid veteran leader. Lead guard that is going to, do very well alongside Haley Van Lith and Morgan Jones. So if you compare the starting lineups of Chelsea Hall, Haley Van Lith, Emily Ingsler, Kiana Smith, and Olivia Cochran to now Chrislyn Carr, Haley Van Lith, Morgan Jones. For this exercise, let's go Alexia Mobley and Olivia Cochran. I think that you have some very solid pieces coming back. Obviously, you're adding 2 very, very good pieces, and the Cardinals are not yet done. There's been reports that the team is still looking to add some more pieces, possibly in the front court and adding some more size in the post. So I do think that this team has the potential to get back to the Final Four. Obviously, you have to have good health. You have to have these players be able to mesh well, and I do think from a roster standpoint speaking, yeah, I think that this team does have the potential to get back to the Final Four. So, but that's all for this mailbag that we have time for today. Like I mentioned, 2 episodes for the next 3 days. Be sure to check the one out talking about Brandon Huntley Hatfield, Roosevelt Wheeler, and the Louisville front court as a whole. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the Cardinals and the NFL draft. On tomorrow's episode, also talk about some recent hires in men's basketball, football, and women's basketball. As always, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Do yourself a favor now. Make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And for those who didn't catch it on last week's show, I currently have, I think it's like 273 subscribers on YouTube. Once it hits subscriber number 300, or that was weird saying. Once it reaches 300 total subscribers, I'm going to do a contest to where a fan of the show is able to come on as my co-host for an episode and talk about 3 topics of their choice. And that will be obviously conducted after we reach 300 subscribers. I really do appreciate everyone that is viewing and listening and sharing and subscribing to the podcast. Very, very appreciative on whatever streaming services that you all are using. But hey, that's going to wrap up this bonus episode on this Thursday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. We will see you right back here tomorrow.